I'm with Simon Millward. He has a Cadillac 8-meter and it's called Chateau Cat, and he's had it for 2 years. And he came to catamaran sailing after growing up with a monohull. So we're really curious about how it's been to have a catamaran for him, what kind of experiences he's had. So I guess my first question, Simon, is what made you choose a catamaran and what led you to the Cadillac 8-meter specifically?
Sure. So there were two real reasons for choosing a catamaran. Firstly, I wanted a lot of space, and secondly, I wanted to be able to put lots of solar panels on it because I used to have a solar panel business, and I'm really interested in fully electrifying this boat, so even having electric motors that power it along when necessary. I haven't got there yet, but I have started getting the layout there of the solar panels. And then also there was the size of it in terms of the internal space, which is important. I've got 2 small children, and so with the 4 of us, it was important to have enough internal space, and you get so much more space on a catamaran. This is a 27-foot or 8-meter catamaran, so much more internal space than you do on an equivalent sized monohull.
Got it. So you grew up on a monohull though. So was the leap to a catamaran, what made you make that decision?
So yes, I grew up on a 24-foot monohull, which my dad built, and I had 2 brothers as well. So there were 5 of us on a 24-foot boat, which was quite compact, let's say. But then recently I sailed in a Cat. I think it was a 9-meter or 10-meter Cat. It was unbelievable. I mean, this is a racing catamaran, but the space inside, the stability and the speed with which it would sail at was quite incredible when you compare that to the boat that I grew up on. So I was looking for something close to that, but for a tiny fraction of the price. And the Catalac comes there as a tiny fraction of the price and gets a little bit close, certainly with stability. And actually, it's a lot faster than the monohull was that I grew up on as well.
Well, that's cool. So what have you been doing with your catamaran? Where have you been traveling? I understand you took it on a fairly significant journey.
Yes, so I've had 2 years. And the first summer, we took it along the south coast of England. We went over to France a few times, and then we parked it in the Thames estuary over the winter. But then last summer, just even with the COVID problems, we were able to get across the North Sea over to the north coast of Holland and Germany and even as far as Denmark. And then we sailed it all the way back as well.
So tell me a little bit about that journey, some of your experiences. Was everything smooth sailing the whole time, or how did the boat handle?
Yeah, the boat handled really well. There were 3 key passages that we did. The first one was getting across to northern Holland in the first place, and that was with 2 children and my brother. And that went really well. It took nearly 2 days. It took 47 hours, so a little bit longer than we expected. And that was because we were tacking into wind for part of it. But the weather was really perfect. We didn't have very strong winds, and it didn't rain at all, I don't think. So 47 hours of pretty nice sailing in the North Sea. And I would say actually that tacking into wind is one of the downsides of the Catalac and catamarans in general, but particularly the Catalac. It's really difficult to get it any more than about 60 degrees to the wind, or any less than 60 degrees to the wind. So that can be challenging. But we got there in 47 hours and it was a nice crossing. Then the 2 other crossings, fortunately, we started off with a fairly nice one. The 2 other difficult crossings were coming back from Denmark to northern Holland. We got caught in a thunderstorm overnight, and then actually coming from Holland all the way back to England. That's about 150 nautical miles. And we went through a gale actually there, and that was really quite exciting. But fortunately, we'd had the experiences of the previous sailing, so I knew how to refit well and how to handle it fairly well in strong winds. And the winds were in a good direction there, so we didn't have to go into wind at all.
So how did the boat do, and how did you do?
I think I would say I got a lot better at sailing it over this period, and particularly reefing proactively. So that was the really important point. The main sail is slab reefing. You can do roller reefing around the boom, although I haven't worked out exactly how to do that. Slab reefing gets it relatively small, and it's never been too much sail that we've had up, except that the roller furling in the jib was a little bit problematic. I think I've sorted out how to work that well now, but actually in this first thunderstorm that we got caught in, the roller reefing didn't work. It had slipped off the drum that it rolls around. And so for quite a while, the jib was flapping as I was pointing it into wind and I turned the motor on. So we damaged the jib, unfortunately, a little bit. But if I'd proactively reefed like I did in the gale going, we got into this gale about halfway across the North Sea. And it was quite a clear juncture between fairly calm weather, and then we went through this front and into this gale and proactively reefing. And by that time, I had already gone upwind fairly well, so I wasn't having to go into wind at all. I was going across the wind directly, and with a very small jib and the smallest mainsail we could put up, that worked really well, actually. And it actually flew across. It was going at about 8 knots most of the time during these strong winds.
Oh, wow. So it sounds like the boat handled it beautifully.
It did really, and actually this was overnight as well. And in the morning when the sun started coming up and I could see the size of the waves that we were going across, I was really quite surprised that I hadn't noticed it being too uncomfortable during the night. So yes, it did really handle extremely well. I would say one challenge was some of the waves were actually breaking over the boat, and when they got to being quite a lot of force on the windows, then a lot of water came in through the windows, so I've got to do something to sort out sealing those windows a little bit better. But then it's a 40-year-old catamaran, so maybe that's understandable. And I think there are quite often problems with the windows, and so there's quite a lot of people sharing advice on how you can seal these. So that's a project over this winter.
Yes, I think windows are a problem on every boat. It's especially older boats. It's an ongoing thing, and the technology is definitely coming along about how we can attach and keep them dry. But what about, so windows and tacking is challenge? Is there anything else that you've found particularly challenging about the boat?
No, not really. One of the things is it's amazingly low maintenance. I would have thought, particularly on a 40-year-old boat like this, that it would have needed more maintenance. But actually, it's got the original fuse box still in it and quite a lot of the original electrics. A lot has been upgraded as new things have been put in it. But it's got an awful lot of the original features that are actually still working really well, apart from the windows, maybe.
Right. So it sounds like it's been a great boat for you. What are some of your favorite aspects?
Yeah, it has been a really good boat. One good aspect, and I looked at this specifically when I bought it, was that it's got an inboard-outboard engine. So it's in the cockpit, and a normal outboard engine put in the cockpit, and that swivels with the rudders, and so it makes it extremely maneuverable. And actually, it also makes it easy to maintain as well, so quite easy to lift the motor out. And that's actually in the back of my car at the moment, so I'm going to service it over the winter. But it was very easy just to lift that motor out using the boom, move it across and into the back of the car.
So that must make it really easy to dock.
Yes, and actually we came back in these storms that were happening. We came back from Denmark back to England. We first went Denmark to Holland and then went through the canals in Holland. There's a mast route there that you can go through with your mast up. And it was really maneuverable there. And I was certainly not envying the monohulls that I saw that were having trouble getting through the various docks and the various places that you had slight squeezes and you had to moor up. And it was just so easy with this because the engine turns with the rudders. So that makes it extremely maneuverable.
That's interesting. That's cool. So you've done one big trip. It sounds like you don't have a lot of projects that you have to do on the boat. So you must be making plans. What's the future for you?
Yeah, I think this summer, the plan is to go as far as the north of Scotland and probably stay around the UK. Maybe we'll even get as far as the Faroe Islands, but the key plan is probably spend about 6 weeks going around the UK up to the Scottish Islands.
That sounds pretty great. And you're confident that's the right location for the boat and your family's all set?
I think so. Maybe weather-wise, it gets a little bit colder the further north you go, but these boats apparently were developed for sailing through the North Sea, and certainly it did very well last summer sailing through the North Sea. So I think in terms of the boat, that will be fine. In terms of whether my family likes the weather, we'll see.
Fair enough. Well, thank you so much, Simon, for speaking with us. It sounds like a great boat and that you're having some good adventures. And I was really curious about the Cadillac, so that's been really neat to learn more. Thank you.
My pleasure.